Well, I'll never forget the day I called my mom to tell her the news. I was a sophomore at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. I was 19 years old and preparing to leave for my junior year abroad. Aware that this was a really important crossroads, I knew it was time to let my mom in on a deep, dark secret that I had kept hidden from her for many months. On that call, I beat around the bush for as long as I could, and then finally I said, "Mom, I've declared art history and German as my double major." For most of my life up to this point, nobody would have seen this revelation coming. That's me on the end, and as a teenager, the only things that really caught my attention were hockey, baseball, and girls. And as a 16-year-old, certainly not in that order. But a few things happened that year that changed the focus and trajectory of my life. On the first day of school of my junior year in high school, my best friend died. A best friend who happened to be my dad. 3 weeks earlier, he had been on the losing end of a bad auto accident. A pair of kids had stolen a car and they were out joyriding. At speeds eclipsing 90 miles an hour, they lost control of the vehicle that they were driving, skidded across the grass median, and slammed right into the driver's side of the car that my dad was taking home from the Philadelphia airport. We were all looking forward to having him back home, and after 3 weeks in the ICU, that never happened. So I started that year a week later than all these guys, and thankfully I had their support and also the support of my family, but it was not an easy time. That year, though, I finally added varsity cross country to my resume, and that meant that I could sign at a gym class. 3 sport athletes could do that, and I thought, this is a great deal. I won't have to get changed in the middle of the day. I can focus my energy on games that actually matter, and I can probably get an easy A. So I enrolled into AP Art History, which was taught by a kind, soft-spoken man named Mr. Planck. A fan of 19th century romanticism, Mr. Planck put up a picture that changed my life. Upon seeing German painter Caspar David Friedrich's Monk by the Sea, I became a different person. The painting features a solitary monk standing on the shore, looking out at the abyss of a dark ocean and an immense gray sky that takes up nearly 4/5 of the composition. This image spoke to me. I could not believe that some guy who was painting 200 years before I was born in a place that I had never been could capture exactly how I felt. For the rest of the week, all I could talk about was this painting and that class, and my friends and family could not believe it. John had shifted gears from talking hockey and heavy metal music to fine art. From that moment on, I knew that creativity was important and could be a powerful connective force. Seeing Friedrich's painting allowed a sad, confused, scared teenager to know that it was okay. Someone else had been there, come out of it, and created something important. From that moment on, all I've ever wanted was a job that would allow me to get others as excited about connecting through creativity as I was, especially people like me who didn't think that they could be. And now I have that job, the only job I've ever wanted. I'm the executive director of an art museum, and a great one at that. I shared with you how creativity was a gateway for a powerful connection from me to someone else. For the rest of the talk, I'd like to describe why all this is important at this very moment in time, and why art museums have never been more necessary resources for the communities that we serve. So why does Hickory need an art museum? It's a question that I get asked all the time. I think it comes from bad experiences that people have had with art museums. So think boring field trips as elementary school students, or maybe staring face to face with a minimalist painting that you just don't get. There are also mysteries and misperceptions that cloud people's understandings of art museums. Do I have to be quiet like in a library? Do I need to be dressed up to go? As a museum educator and now director, I have spent most of my life striving to disabuse people of these lines of thinking. It's not always been an easy road. I've led professional development workshops for angry football coaches who also happen to be high school history teachers. You can imagine how excited these guys were to look at paintings with me at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. But when I've done my job well, I've spotted some of these guys back in the museum on the weekend trying to impress their dates. I've argued with curators about how the language that they use to describe art can sometimes alienate uninitiated, non-expert viewers. And I've even pushed to do a prototype of an exhibition section before launching the finished product so that we could watch audiences in our spaces and try to create a better experience. My mission has always been to transform art museums from closed, authoritarian institutions to radically open marketplaces of ideas, spaces where dialogue, making, and fostering creative interactions become the currency and lifeblood of the museum. This is one I'm super proud of. It's when we turned a gallery at one of the museums I worked in into an incubator space. I'm here to argue today that there has never been more of a need for the type of art museum I described than now. A few years back, economists writing for outlets like Forbes and Harvard Business Review began to describe our global climate as reflective of a VUCA world. VUCA is an acronym that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And think about the events from the last few months. From Brexit to North Korea, to mass killings, to weather events, even a tornado right here in Hickory. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous certainly seems about right. Think too about technology. It took us thousands of years to move from pottery to agriculture to the Roman Empire to the printing press. And now in recent years, the rate of innovation has been staggering. We've moved from the cell phone revolution to advances such as artificial intelligence. By 2020, your smartphone will literally be smarter than you. 3D printing, Internet of Things, driverless cars, all of these things are happening at once. And when they converge, entire economies can be disrupted. It truly is a VUCA world. The future is happening, and it's happening now. Without a doubt, these seismic movements are affecting life in the community that we call home. Hickory, like most mid-sized cities, is seeking answers to some pretty complicated questions that arise against the backdrop of this VUCA world. Being new to town, I spend a lot of my time listening and learning, and I'm hearing over and over again questions like, what's next in terms of economic development? How can we attract more young people? And how can we create more connected and inclusive communities? Well, TED is all about looking for answers to complicated questions in unexpected places. And I truly believe that when art museums push beyond their conventional boundaries, they can be exactly the type of creative catalysts that communities need to move ahead in today's VUCA world. When we see our work as more than just hanging pictures on the wall, new possibilities are open. When we strive for participation and engagement with all of the audiences that comprise our potential reach, we can be a much needed public space for the generation of new ideas and working together. The world we are living in literally demands an art museum like the one I described. Several years ago, Newsweek ran a feature titled The Creativity Crisis. It detailed how a College of William & Mary professor used Torrance test data to seek to assess the state of creative abilities in American students. Looking at over 300,000 scores from over a 25-year period, what she found was very distressing. American students have been growing increasingly less creative since 1990. What are some things that happened in 1990 that could have led to that? Kids were watching more TV, they were playing more video games, and at the same time, standardized testing became even more prevalent in American schools. The same publication also detailed the findings of an IBM poll of 1,500 CEOs who identified creativity as the #1 leadership competency of the future. And the need for creativity extends far beyond the business world. We also need imaginative new ideas to complex problems or wicked problems that we face. Things like global hunger, religious extremism, conflict across countries and communities. One wicked problem that just about every community faces is the growing lack of empathy that has become a defining characteristic of contemporary life. The gaps between rich and poor have never been more pronounced than at this moment, and this creates unspoken boundaries that separate our neighborhoods, divide our classrooms, and keep us isolated in our bubbles. At the same time, that ever-present buzz of notifications and alerts from our phones keeps us looking down at our screens instead of into the eyes and hearts of our friends and neighbors. From world politics to interactions across our own community, contemporary life is growing increasingly fractured. And this is where the socially motivated, participatory art museum comes into play. At this crossroads of a creativity and empathy gap, museums, when we frame our purpose differently, can become microcosms of a new tomorrow where these issues are worked out and resolved. My museum is currently collaborating with our community on a new strategic plan that will provide a roadmap for how we can connect people through the power of creativity. I've described what this has meant in my own life, and now we want to share that gift with our audiences. We're striving to create a conceptual framework, or dare I say even a brand platform, that positions creatively driven social connectedness at the core of everything that we do. One thing that Dad used to tell me was it's crazy to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So we're looking further afield than our own history and the museum world for inspiration. We're borrowing from product development disciplines like human-centered design to learn about our audiences by way of interviews, observing people in our space, and striving to gain the empathy that we need to create better museum experiences. Already we know from what we're learning that coming into a space to look at pictures hanging in a wall is not exactly an exciting value prop for too many people. So we're seeking to use our exhibitions and programs as platforms to teach how the creative mind works, to encourage audiences to get their hands dirty and give it a try, and when we do our work really well, to have a conversation with someone they've never met before while doing it. And our team is working with great intentionality to build this into everything we do. In the time I have left, I'll share some examples of what this is looking like. Thinking about creative entrepreneurialism and economic development, we hopped on the opportunity to share. Thank you. Local graphic designer Matt Everly's project titled Beer Type Logos. This artist loves beer and font types, so he challenged himself to create 52 fictional beer logos that combine the two. But we didn't leave it there. We wanted people to look critically and dialogue about what they were seeing. So we created a ballot that had 7 of the beer labels and asked, which is your favorite? Which would you like to taste? And partnering with a local brewing company, we were really happy to debut Metalord Black IPA, which emerged as the winner from the hundreds of votes that were cast. We'll pick up the theme of creative entrepreneurialism again this spring when we exhibit the work of Matthew Diffie, the New Yorker cartoonist. The exhibition will feature his hand-drawn jokes, and I'll let that sink in for a second. But it will also include his fine art work in a variety of mediums. What I'm most excited about, though, is Matt is also letting us exhibit this, an example of a discipline that he uses each morning to be creative enough to come up with ideas that sell. Every morning when he wakes up, he pours himself a pot of coffee, gives himself a blank sheet of paper, and does a series of warm-up exercises that eventually lead to a mind map of ideas that might have a joke within them. And you can see the origins of that pigeon gag is circled over there. Thinking about the creativity deficit that I described before, this exhibition will literally teach skill sets and habits that can help you come up with new ideas. And we'll want people to connect about this, right? So we're going to have an interactive space where audiences will have the chance to work together on creating captions for some of Matt's drawings. I'll conclude with an example from an exhibition that just wrapped up a few weeks ago called Past Lives. Past Lives featured the photography of Hickory-born artist Brian Lackey alongside personal objects that he composed to tell the story of his journey as he was working on issues like substance abuse, sexuality, and his own identity. Talk about connecting through the power of creativity. But we did not leave it there. Partnering with Brian and the show's guest curator, we created a space within the exhibition where audiences were invited to journal about their own lives by responding to prompts that were based on the themes of the exhibition. Here is an example that I found really resonant. It reads, "As my new life takes me in, I will leave this energy behind. Those who used me, abused me, tried to change me, and left me. I leave behind anything that holds me back from my purpose." The idea was this: even if you weren't there when somebody visited the exhibition, you still had a chance to learn from and connect with them, to be spoken to exactly the same way I was when I first saw Caspar David Friedrich's Monk by the Sea. In the VUCA world that we live in, where creativity and empathy are diminishing at the time we need them most, I truly believe that our community gets stronger and better positioned for an innovative, sustainable future every single time this happens. It takes a lot of focus and discipline to do this consistently, but I believe enormous power is unlocked when art museums connect people through creativity.